What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm here to bring you the Season 3, Episode 9 review of The Walking Dead entitled The Suicide King. And I must say, it feels good to be back. It definitely feels good to be back. I'm glad that this long ass hiatus is finally over. uh, Damn, man, this hiatus lasted like almost 3 months. Just a ridiculous amount of time. So definitely happy to be back. And I don't know about you guys, but my hiatus, even though it was long, and I would prefer a shorter hiatus, uh, I actually was pretty productive over my hiatus. I went out and I bought the entire series of the Walking Dead comic books and I read them all. So if you have not read the comic books, and I can't recommend it highly enough, I cannot recommend that comic book highly enough. So when you finish watching this review of The Walking Dead, you head over to Amazon.com. You pick up the first compendium, you pick up the second compendium, and you get the latest volume, volume 17, I believe it is, called Something to Fear. I've read the entire comic book series and it's just mind blowing. I can say now, unequivocally, having read the comic books, that the comic books just blow the TV series out of the water. And the TV series is great. Don't get me wrong, the TV series is definitely great. But the comic books blows it out of the water by a mile. Now, now that I've gotten all the prefatory stuff out of the way, let's turn to this episode. And this episode was a little bit, I must say, underwhelming. And that's not to say that it was a bad episode. It wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't great. It wasn't excellent. It was just an okay episode. Basically, it's a transitional episode that sets up the ensuing conflict between Rick's group and the governor's group. Because you know there's going to be a showdown. There just has to be a showdown. And so, in that sense, I guess this episode, while underwhelming, was definitely necessary for the progression of the narrative. So that's just my overall assessment, general assessment of this episode, is that it was just okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. So now let's get into the summary and analysis of this episode. We start off basically where we left off. The town is inside that arena type place. I don't even know if it's an arena, but it's, you know, the place where they all gather so to see the Walker fights. So they're all there. The governor's there, Andrea's there, the whole town is there. And the governor has turned on Merle. He's basically turned on Merle. And Daryl is unmasked so that Merle can see that it's his brother that's been captured, and Andrea now realizes who the supposed attackers of on Woodbury were. And the governor turns to Merle, and this is just a paraphrase, but he basically tells him, "Listen, you screwed me on that Michonne thing." Yeah. I think it was, I don't know, I just find that comical and ironic that Merle told him that Michonne was dead, and then now Michonne has become this huge thorn in the governor's side. So the governor says, and not these exact words, "You screwed me on the Michonne thing, and here's your chance to make it up. I want you to fight your brother to the death, and I want you to kill him so that you can prove to me and everybody else in Woodbury that you're really on our side and not on the side of these so-called terrorists or attackers." And so while this is going on, something very interesting happens. And that is, Andrea finally realizes who the supposed attackers are, and she starts screaming her head off. "You can't do this. Stop this. This is barbaric," and all this other good stuff. And it's at this point that I start wondering to myself, I wonder if this is the beginning of her epiphany about who the governor really is. Because she's been taken to task by both myself and a lot of other Walking Dead viewers who are just saying to themselves, she's just a dunce. She's just a dunce for getting it in with the governor. So I thought to myself, I hope that this will be the beginning of her epiphany about who the governor really is. But as it turns out, unfortunately, this would not be the case for this episode for reasons I'll explain later on. So, like I said, the governor wants Merle to kill Daryl in the fight to the death, and the fight starts, and Merle is beating up Daryl, and he's trying to put on a show for the governor, basically, and he's trying to find a way to get himself and Daryl out of this situation so that they, can both survive. And what's crazy is that not only is this a fight to the death, but then they start bringing out walkers. So Daryl has to put on the show. Both Daryl and Merle have to put on the show that like they're really fighting each other, while at the same time having to deal with the walkers who are being brought out as well. And right in the nick of time, Rick shows up. He creates a huge disturbance, disruption, distraction, and in the process of all this mayhem created by Rick's um created by Rick, he is able to save both Merle and Daryl, and they're able to get away. All right, so my thoughts on this whole scene scenario, if you will. I guess whatever. Whatever. That's just my reaction. It's everybody knew that there needed to be some sort of plot device in order to get Merle and Daryl out of this, and we all knew from the previews that they would escape from Woodbury. We just didn't know how. So we knew that there was going to be some plot device that was going to be necessary to get them out of this situation, and I just feel like the way they did it was just a tired motif of narratives where somebody comes in just in the nick of time, creates a distraction, and people get away. Whatever. And I think that this show has reached a level, or at least my expectations for the level of the writing of this show are so high that when I see them employing tired motifs and plot devices like this, I kind of just say, that's underwhelming. It's just really not, whatever. Like I said, I guess. Second thing, I was wondering whether or not they're foreshadowing some transformation in the governor's character. Because it's really time for, I mean, we should all face it. And I've been saying this for at least the last couple of episode reviews. It's just time for the governor to stop being a pussy willow. It's just time. It's time for him to stop being a pussy willow. He's not frightening. He's I mean, it's not even clear that he's a villain in any sense of the word. He doesn't feel like a threat. He seems pretty benign. I mean, yes, they tortured Maggie and Glenn or whatever, but they didn't even kill anybody. And that wasn't even the governor. It was freaking Merle. I mean, the governor didn't even do anything. He had Maggie undress and then just told her to get dressed again. I mean, it was like the threat of rape, but he didn't even do anything. I mean, he's just such an underwhelming, antagonistic figure for a series that's supposed to be horror. At least it's supposed to be in that genre. It's not a complete horror, but it's supposed to be part horror. And this guy, the governor, is just underwhelming. He's just not scary. He's not frightening. He's benign. It's just he's just underwhelming, to put it that way. And the reason why I say that I think that the writers might be foreshadowing a transformation in his character is because while all this mayhem was going on that Rick had in his group had created in trying to rescue Daryl and Merle, the governor just seemed to be in a stupor, in a daze, almost like he was just in a sort of semi-catatonic state. And so there was all this mayhem going on around him, and he was just nonchalantly walking around, not really doing anything, not saying anything. He just seemed to be in a daze and a stupor. And so I'm wondering if this is some foreshadowing of his transformation into more of a psycho. Because in the comic books, I've read the comic books, like I said. In the comic books, he just is a true monster. He's a true monster. He is brutal, a real monster. So that's what I want him to be. Just more of a kick-ass type of antagonist. That's what I want. The third thing about this scenario, there was a bit of a dust up. Well, after they save Rick and not Rick. After Rick and his group saves Daryl and Merle, there was a point where there was a kind of dust up between Rick and Merle when Rick finally realizes that Merle was going to be sort of tagging along with the group. And mm, so Rick and Merle kind of get into it just a little bit, and Merle's response was, "You really want to do this now?" And Rick's response was, "Okay, fuck it. Let's just move on. Let's just get out of this situation first." My response would have been to just shoot Merle in the head and call it a day. Just on sight, just pop him on sight. Get rid of him. Just absolutely get rid of this guy. Because Merle, and I said the same thing when he showed up with Glenn. I said he just should have shot him in the head. Just absolutely get rid of him. Because Merle is just a psycho. Just a psychotic X factor. You just never know what he's planning, never know what he's going to do, and he has the capacity to do anything brutal and gruesome. So just get rid of him. And what made this situation even crazier in retrospect is that Rick wants to get rid of Tyrese and his group. So he wants to kick them out. But he took Merle along with him. I mean, he didn't. He told Daryl that he didn't want Merle to stay in the group. That's true. But while they were busy getting away from the governor, Merle could have had one of his other tricks up his sleeve and betrayed them at any point in time during their retreat. And that's just something you shouldn't allow, especially when you know that this person, how dangerous this person is, what this person is capable of. Rick should have just never even let that possibility come up. Should have just got rid of him. But on the other hand, he allows Merle to come along with him during the retreat, and yet he wants to kick Tyrese and their group out of the prison. That just didn't make sense to me. Especially considering the fact that also not only did he want to kick Tyrese's group out of the prison, but he didn't even want Michonne to stay. I mean, he was gonna kick Michonne out, but let Merle come along. That's just I mean, it was actually Glenn who had to convince Rick to let Michonne come with them back to the prison because he was just going to kick Michonne out just like he was going to kick Merle out. Makes absolutely no sense. Especially considering the fact that Merle is the one who you know is dangerous and Michonne has never shown any sort of threat towards the group. And on top of that, she's the only reason why you were able to save Glenn and Maggie in the first place. So, I mean, Rick, I mean, that was just some interesting character inconsistencies or plot holes. It just didn't sit right with me. Rick's reaction to Merle. It seems like his reaction should have been more forceful towards Merle than it was. Especially given the fact that his reaction to other people who didn't show themselves to be threats was so forceful. All right. So if you remember from the last episode, the group had been split up where Glenn and I forget who I don't quite remember who was in what group. In any event, they finally managed to recombine, get back together, and Rick makes it clear to Daryl that he does not want Merle in the group under any circumstances. It's just not going to happen. So Daryl has to choose between the group and Merle, and Daryl chooses Merle. And quite honestly, Daryl is an idiot for that. I mean, he's just an absolute idiot for that. Now I understand why he did what he did. I mean, of course, he thinks that Merle is his brother, and it's his blood, and there's that old adage, blood is thicker than water, and he feels guilt about having left Merle behind in season 1, because he actually says this to Rick. I'm not leaving him behind again. I already did that once. I'm not doing that again. So obviously he feels some guilt about leaving his brother behind in season 1. And like I said, I understand why he did what he did, but it was still stupid. I mean, on one hand, you have a brother who is a scumbag, racist, torturing, murdering psycho. And on the other hand, you have the group who has killed for you, who is willing to die for you. In fact, some of the group members have already died for you, taken care of you, looked after you, and you choose your crazy psycho brother over the group. I mean, I understand when people say blood is thicker than water, but that's just simply not true. I mean, because if I had a brother like that, I'd choose the group rather than my brother. I mean, family doesn't mean shit in these sort of circumstances. Because you have to do what's rational, do what's reasonable, do what's logical. And what is not logical is sticking by your psycho brother. Just not reasonable at all. Just not reasonable. So Daryl is out of the group because he goes with Merle, and it looks like Michonne is also going to be kicked out of the group too. I say it looks like. I mean, I don't think they can do that. I'm talking about the writers. I don't think that Michonne is really going to be kicked out of the group simply because I've read the comic books, and she's such a central figure to the entire comic book series. I mean, they're just not going to kick her out. So I expect there to be some sort of plot device or reason why Michonne gets to stay and is just not tossed out. Although Rick obviously doesn't want her there, as he's made perfectly clear. Meanwhile, back in Woodbury, everything is just going to hell in a handbasket. People are scared. They want to leave. They're trying to get out of Woodbury. They're trying to get through the gates, and the governor's sort of armed guards are just, they don't want people to leave. So they've locked down, pretty much locked down Woodbury and make it impossible for anybody to get out. And while this is going on, the governor is just in his house, and again, it's like he's in a stupor or a daze, or like he just doesn't know what the hell's going on. It's mysterious. That's why I say that it looks like it could be some foreshadowing of a character transformation. Because again, he's just in a stupor, in a daze. And at one point, some walkers even managed to get inside Woodbury, which was foreshadowed in an earlier scene. When Rick created that distraction to save Merrill and Daryl, one of the gates were the gate was breached, and some walkers were able to get inside the town. So it was at this point that these walkers made themselves known by attacking somebody. And so everybody has to run over and see what's going on. They see that this guy is being attacked, and Andrea is able to kill both of the walkers. And the guy is just laying there. He's obviously suffering in a lot of pain. He's not going to make it. He's been bitten. There's just no way he can be saved. And people are telling Andrea, do something. What are you going to do? Help this guy, do something. And I thought this was very actually uncharacteristic of Andrea, because she just seemed to be stuck, like she didn't know what to do. Obviously, you gotta shoot the guy in the head to stop his suffering. And the Andrea I know from the series would just do that without any sort of hesitation. But in this instance, she hesitated. And while she was hesitating, the governor comes out of his house, walks up to the guy that's on the ground, takes out his gun, shoots him in the head, puts the gun back in his holster, turns around, walks away, and goes back in his house. Doesn't say anything. Says absolutely nothing. So I mean, again, the governor just seems like he's just out of it. Just seems to be out of it. And finally, we get Andrea confronting the governor about everything that just went down. And this is the part that just so completely makes me give up on Andrea's character. All right, so Andrea confronts the governor about the supposed attack on Woodbury and the attackers. And she tells the governor, listen, you knew that this was the group that I used to be a part of. Why didn't you tell me they were here? Why didn't you tell me this? Why didn't you ever reintroduce me to them? And the governor goes on and spouts this bullshit about, well, they were just passing through and I didn't think that you wanted to see them again and you wanted to stay here and they were going to be moving on, but they turned on me and they attacked me and they killed all these people. I mean, he just starts spinning this bullshit out of whole cloth. Just a bunch of bullshit. And I was thinking to myself, there's no way Andrea is stupid enough to believe this. And she's not really going to buy this bullshit, is she? I mean, at one point, Andrea even asks him, why would they do that? Why would they just turn on you like that? What motivation did they have? And again, the government's just spinning this bullshit out of whole cloth, and she buys it. She, she, she actually buys this. I mean, at this point, I've just given up on Andrea's character, and it's a pity because it seems like the writers just have no idea how to write female characters in this show. I mean, the only other female character is Maggie, and she hardly gets any play at all. They just absolutely destroyed Laurie's character, and Andrea's character. I mean, she's been with Shane, she's been with the governor, she's buying all this bullshit. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, the writers are really struggling with handling female characters. They're really struggling with this, and I don't really think anybody on the writing team knows how to actually handle women in a good way. They just don't know how to write for women. Because, I mean, Andrea has been warned by Michonne. Not just warned by her, but warned repeatedly by Michonne. The woman who took care of her, who kept her alive, who went to look for medicine for her when she was sick, basically took care of her at the expense of putting herself at danger. And Michonne warns her about the governor, and Andrea just doesn't want to freaking believe him. And now the governor is clearly spinning this bullshit out of whole cloth, and she eats it up. She just absolutely eats it up. Even though she's seen the Walker fights, she's seen the fight to the death between Merle and Daryl. She's been warned by Michonne. She knows that it's just completely out of character for the group to attack Woodbury, and yet it just looks like she's eating it up. And she's still siding with the governor. And she saw the freaking heads in the tank, man. I mean, there's just so many. I mean, how many warning signs does this chick need? I mean, how much more obvious could it be that the governor is not who he purports to be? I mean, eh, what would it take? What would it take for Andrea to realize this guy's full of shit? I mean, so her character, I've just completely given up on her character because it's just ridiculous character inconsistency for Andrea, who up until this point just pretty much always showed good judgment, always made the right decisions, always seemed to be reasonable, and now she's just it's like she's a parody of her former self, and it just disgusts me that the writers have done this to her character. Because she's not like this at all in the comic books. Some other important stuff before I finish off this review. Rick is clearly losing his mind, and this was evidenced by the fact that he's hallucinating again, and he saw Laurie, and it's clear that he has schizophrenia at this point. And what's also important is not just that he has schizophrenia, but that everybody knows it now because he just fucking loses his shit in front of everybody, screaming at the hallucination of Lori. Why are you there? Get out of here! Leave me alone. I mean, he just totally flips his lid. So everybody else knows that there's definitely something wrong with Rick, and Herschel definitely knows it now because if you remember that scene where Rick tells Herschel that somebody called him on the prison phone, and Rick leaves the room, and then Herschel is just there by himself, and he picks up the phone and there's nothing. So Herschel should definitely know that there's something wrong with Rick at this point. Also, Tyrese better not die at the end of this season. I'm just stating that right now because if I mean listen, T Dog was just a two-dimensional cardboard character who always had a 10-word maximum limit per episode. That was T Dog's limit. Andrew was killed off summarily. Oscar was killed off summarily. And if Tyrese dies at the end of this freaking season, I am gonna flip my lid. I'm gonna blow my fucking stack if this guy gets killed at the end of this season. I just have a feeling that it's gonna happen, and if it does, I'm gonna blow my shit. I'm gonna blow this shit up if he gets killed at the end of this season. And not only that, but they gotta establish his character better than this. They must do something to better establish Tyrese's character. And the same thing with Michonne. I mean they just can't continue to downgrade her character like this. She has no characterization, no character development, no backstory. I mean, she's a central figure in the comic books. In the TV show, she's just relegated to being a a guard dog. That's pretty much what she is. A guard dog with a sword. She has no characterization, no character development, nothing. So if Tyrese dies at the end of this season and they continue to stiff my girl Michonne in the character development department, I'm gonna blow my shit. And that's pretty much it for this episode. So yeah. Also, I'm not sure about this, but I might start doing some speculation or prediction videos. I know some of you guys have asked me about that, and I've given it some thought, and I might start doing those, but haven't really made a definite decision about that. So yeah, this episode was not great, not terrible, just okay transition episode. So yeah, this was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.